Hi, I'm Shalane from TSC Tuition, and today I'll be reviewing a body paragraph comparing the Queen and Ransom. This body paragraph comes courtesy of ATAR Notes. I've put the link in the description box below, so go and check that link out for the full text of the body paragraph. Let's get right to it. So the topic sentence is, both texts show the necessity of change as a leader to remain relevant. I think as a topic sentence, it's really great that it's got a really clear point of view. The only problematic spots I can see with this topic sentence is that it's very wide in terms of its scope. So it says the necessity of change as a leader, which I think is possibly not specific enough in terms of what kind of necessity are we talking about? Are we talking about, to remain in power? Is it talking about leadership qualities, to, encourage and inspire your followers? And the other thing is, what kind of change are we talking about? Are we talking about internal change, like changing your own perspective on things, your attitude towards things, your emotional state? Or are we talking about changing as in, changing your leadership styles, changing traditions, changing, anything really? Like, necessity of change is a very wide scope to work with, and a lot of students have trouble when they have such a wide scope that they don't know exactly what they're going to talk about, and so they write a very wide scope for a topic sentence, and then in the body paragraph they kind of lose a bit of it and they don't know exactly what they're talking about. They're waffling a little bit, they're kind of staying on track, they're not really. So I would just say, if this is a student who's working with me, that I think we need to add in a few more qualifiers in terms of what kind of necessity, what kind of change, and then that last bit, to remain relevant. I think these days we have an understanding of what relevant means, but in terms of academically speaking and, literature analysis kind of speaking wise, it's again not clear. Relevant as in, are we talking about so that they can be in touch with the people, that they understand the people more? Are we talking about relevance as in that they can govern their people more effectively? So again, these are very vague terms that we're working with. So I would just suggest to this student that we need to just clarify what you're going to talk about in this body paragraph just a little bit more, so that the student has an easier time when they're explaining the evidence, and that they have certain things that they can grab onto in their explanation when they're explaining the evidence. But anyways, let's have a look at the next couple of sentences. So a couple of things stand out to me. One is, there's not a lot of evidence that this student is working with. And what that tells me is that, one, this student doesn't have really good quote bank. So I would say you need to go back to your quote bank and really either reorganize it or make it work better for you. The other thing is that there's a lot of talking about evidence without evidence and without explanation. So in those couple of sentences, we get a bit of, Achilles is introduced at sort of this point in the plot, and that he's going to be trapped in the cycle of destruction. But there's no real analysis or explanation of how he's trapped, of what kind of cycle of destruction. There's no, I think the strongest evidence that this student has is that bit where, he says that Achilles' men are looking at him with mistrust and fear. I think that should be a quote, first of all. And two, I think that's a really solid bit of evidence, because that's like an entire scene, right? That's the opening scene in which, he's like, destroying the body, and his men are sort of like looking around at him going, oh my God, what is he doing? He's gone nuts. Like, this guy is supposed to lead us into battle. We're all gonna die. He's insane. That scene is really great. And what the student is not doing here is using that to its full effect, to talk about the relevance bit. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying in terms of the topic sentence not being specific enough, because if the topic sentence had said something about, necessity of change to lead effectively or to inspire their followers or to, remain connected with their people, whatever it is. But if it were just a little bit more specific, then when the student introduces this bit of evidence that his men are looking at him with mistrust and fear, then that's a really powerful bit to prove that Achilles needed to change so that his men aren't looking at him with mistrust and fear. And you can sort of, then do a bit of comparison of before and after his meeting with Priam. Just a thought. My second thought is that the student then says this mirroring of the two leaders, but we haven't talked about Priam yet. So I would suggest to the student that you save that word for when you have talked about Priam, and then you can talk about how the two mirror each other. But anyways, let's go on. Okay. I think the difficulty that the student is running into is that this student is trying to do a lot in a very short space. And what is happening, I think, is because this student is trying to talk about so much. He's trying to talk about Achilles. He's trying to talk about Priam. He's trying to compare Priam with Achilles. It's getting lost in the plot bits that this student feels like they need to get through. So, for example, that bit of Somax is, I think, not doing a lot for this body paragraph because it doesn't prove anything about change. It doesn't prove anything about staying relevant. It doesn't prove that Priam needed it or him. Even though, knowing the text, Priam absolutely needed Somax. And I would also suggest that this paragraph spends too much time on Ransom. I'm looking at the page and I would say we're probably at 2/3 of the way through this body paragraph and we're not onto the Queen yet. And knowing the structure of what we need to do, at least a bit of that last third needs to be comparing Ransom with the Queen. So what I'm expecting now is a very short, brief exploration, maybe a summary of what is happening in the Queen. So let's have a look. Similarly, the Queen underlines the importance of change. As both the Queen herself and Blair change in response to Diana's death. Not a great mini topic sentence. Because what you're really saying is that because two people change is important. People could change just because. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that this statement is wrong or inaccurate, but I am saying that these two phrases don't necessarily prove causation. We're simply saying A happens, people change, therefore change is important. Is it? I don't know. Does it not just prove that people change? That people are capable of change? But anyways, let's keep reading. Okay, I'm going to say it now. Now that I'm mostly through with this paragraph. Too many characters in this body paragraph. To talk about, to compare 4 characters in pairs and then with each other is not possible, I would say, in a typical comparative body paragraph length. I would tell the student that pick one from each text. So either compare, the logical thing to do would be to compare Priam with the Queen. I think that would make the most sense. But you could also do other pairings. You could possibly compare Achilles with Blair. You could do Achilles with the Queen. You could do Priam with Blair. Up to you. But I would say one character from each text. And then what that would do is that would allow the student enough space to really explore what is happening in this character, in this one character from the text. And once they've really explored, really delved into these characters, either Priam and the Queen, whatever pairing you want, then you can compare how they needed to change and what that change consisted of, what kind of change we're talking about, how did they go about it, how are they different, how did they do things similarly, how, all the things that you would have to talk about in a comparative body paragraph. But let's go on. The Queen's eventual change, most clearly shown in the Queen's tribute, placates of people who no longer so strongly wish for a change from the monarchy as the monarch showed himself willing to change for them. I think that's a great point. I would love to see this a bit more supported with textual evidence. Something from the scene of the tribute would be really great. Maybe like, talk about the framing of the people watching telly. Maybe you could talk about, any of the cinematic devices in terms of like the soundtrack that was playing at the time. We could talk about the lighting. It's quite different. It's much brighter in that scene than in other scenes when they're sort of like walking through the halls or the corridors of power. It's very different in terms of how it's framed and shot and how the people are arranged around the Queen as well in that scene. So I would like to see more textual evidence to support this really great point about, that the Queen has changed and that she has not necessarily relinquished power, but that she recognizes that she's not going to lose power in changing. And I think, that's a missed opportunity here. And then now we're on to the last sentence. Thus, both texts show the necessity of changes needed to remain relevant. I mean, it's okay as a linking sentence. It's not great because it's just a copy paste from the topic sentence and they've just put thus in front of it. And that's always a really good sign that you need to go back to your body paragraph and think about, okay, well, what points have I made and how can I incorporate that into a, more of a comparative sentence to talk about the points that you've made in this body paragraph. And that's really what we're looking for in that ending sentence. We're looking for a really good summation of your points, not necessarily the main point that you were going to make, but what conclusions have you reached by the end of that paragraph, having talked about, let's say Priam and the Queen and how they changed, how they needed to change, and what were the effects of that. So I think there's a lot of missed opportunities here. I think the student shows that they understand the text, but it doesn't show me that the student has thought really hard about the text. Ultimately, in a comparative essay, what we're really looking for is insightful understanding of what is going on a plot level between the characters and also on an authorial level in terms of, the creator of the text, either author or director, using everything that is in their toolbox as creators of texts to present a narrative in a particular way so that we, the audience, sees the narrative in a particular way. So I hope that was helpful. As always, like and subscribe to all of our social media channels so that you get our latest tips and tricks to achieving your best in your English subject. And as always, if you'd like to get some one-to-one tutoring, whether online or face-to-face, please contact us and we can send someone to you. Thanks for watching.